Have you ever noticed the way a baby stares at you? Not just a quick glance, but a long, quiet look. The kind of stare that feels strangely intense, almost as if they are trying to understand something important. Most adults laugh it off. They assume the baby is simply curious, distracted, or staring into space. And for a long time, that seemed like a reasonable explanation. After all, newborn vision is limited. Babies enter the world seeing only a narrow range clearly, and faces are some of the most important things in that range. Researchers like Teresa Faroni and her colleagues showed that even from birth, infants are especially sensitive to face-like patterns and direct gaze, which means the human brain is biased toward faces much earlier than most people realize. But that old explanation is incomplete. Babies do not stare at you only because faces are visually interesting. They stare because a face is not just an object. To a baby, a face is information. It tells them whether the world is safe, whether someone is present, whether comfort is coming, or whether something feels off. That is where the science becomes much more interesting. In 2017, Victoria Leong and her colleagues published research in PNAS showing that direct gaze increases neural coupling between infants and adults. In simple language, when a baby and an adult look at each other, their brains can begin to coordinate more closely than when eye contact is broken. So the baby is not just watching your face. The baby is, in a very real sense, using your attention and response to help organize their own. That sounds abstract, but the everyday meaning is simple. A baby looks at you. You look back. You soften your face. You respond at the right moment, and the baby learns something enormous. My signal reached another person. That lesson matters more than we tend to realize. Because before language, before logic, before memory becomes stable, babies are already learning the rules of human connection. They learn them through timing, expression, and response. That is also why babies do not look at every face in the same way. A stranger may be visually novel, but a caregiver's face carries history. By the time a young infant has spent weeks and months with one person, that face already contains patterns. What comfort looks like, what tension looks like, what delight looks like, what calm looks like. So when a baby stares at a parent, they are not just checking who is there. They are reading a system they already depend on. Developmental psychologists have a term for part of this process: social referencing. By the late 1980s, work by Walden and Ogun helped show that infants use other people's emotional reactions to guide their own behavior in uncertain situations. In plain English, when a baby does not know how to feel about something new, they often look to a trusted face for the answer. That means your face becomes a shortcut for reality. If your face says, "This is safe," the baby relaxes. If your face says, "Something is wrong," the baby feels that too. And if your face is warm, responsive, and predictable often enough, the baby begins building one of the deepest expectations in human life. People can be reached. This is the part many adults miss. A baby's stare is not passive. It is active observation. It is emotional calibration. It is early communication. A baby looks, you smile, the baby widens their eyes, kicks, or makes a sound. You answer again, That is not just a cute exchange. That is the architecture of conversation being built in real time. And if you want to see just how much babies depend on that loop, there is one experiment that reveals it more clearly than almost anything else. In 1978, Edward Tronick and his colleagues described what became the foundation for the famous still face paradigm. The setup is simple. A caregiver first interacts with the baby normally, smiling, responding, making eye contact. Then, suddenly, the caregiver becomes emotionally still. No smile, no reaction, no response. What happens next is unforgettable. At first, the baby tries harder. They look more intensely. They vocalize, they reach, they do everything they can to pull the interaction back to life. And when nothing comes back, the shift is immediate. The baby becomes confused, distressed, and dysregulated. Some infants protest, some turn away, some begin to cry. Why? Not because babies are fragile in some vague, sentimental sense, but because they are built to expect contingent human response. The still face effect shows that even very young infants are not passive recipients of care. They are active participants in a social exchange, and they notice when that exchange breaks down. This is what makes the stare so important. When a baby looks at your face, they are not doing nothing. They are testing rhythm. They are reading emotion. They are learning whether the world answers back, and over time, those repeated face-to-face moments help shape attention, regulation, and trust. The broad developmental literature links early social interaction with how infants organize emotion and learn to navigate other minds. So, if you are a parent or a caregiver, or just someone holding a baby who suddenly locks eyes with you, it helps to understand what may really be happening. That child may be measuring safety. They may be studying your expression. They may be learning whether their signals matter. They may be building the earliest blueprint for communication and connection. And that leads to an important takeaway. You do not have to be perfect. No caregiver can respond flawlessly all day long. That is not how human relationships work. But being emotionally available often enough matters. Looking back matters. Softening your face matters. And responding in time matters. Because to a baby, a returned look is not a tiny thing. It is evidence. Evidence that the world is not empty. Evidence that other people can be reached. Evidence that feelings can move between one mind and another. Sometimes the smallest exchange, just a look, just a face, just a moment of answered attention, becomes part of how a human being learns to feel safe in the world. So the next time a baby stares at you, do not assume nothing is happening. A great deal is happening. The baby may be using your face to learn how to become a person. And that raises a deeper question. What if a baby rarely looks into your eyes at all? What if the stare never really arrives, or seems to pass through you instead of landing on you? That is where the story becomes even more important.